Oh.
Can you hear me? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
All right, welcome everyone to the afternoon session of the August 10th public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We are going to resume the afternoon session with item number 6 on our hearing agenda, and then we will move to our public meeting agenda. With that, I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the afternoon.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're starting with item 6, LPC 21-07505. An application for a certificate of appropriateness, number of Queens Block 8033, Lot 53, 237 Beverly Road in the Douglaston Historic District. This is an arts and crafts style house designed by Frederick J. Schroeder Jr. and built in 1924. And the application is to enclose a porch, replace windows, and construct dormers and additions.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gilad. I'm the owner representative, and I've come here with Aurel. He's the owner of the house that we're going to talk about today. This first, I'm going to run through the presentation, and then I guess we'll do a question and answer session. This is the house as we purchased it. Here you can see on the top image the house when we purchased it. On the bottom it shows the locations of the additions. This is the house, the 1940s tax photo, just to show what it looked like back then. Here we have a few images that show the lot coverages of the proposed house. And everything is keeping with the zoning of this zoning designation. Here we have pictures of the house when it was purchased. You have all the different elevations. So on the top left, it's the west elevation. You have the north elevation to the image to the right of that. On the bottom left is the eastern elevation, and the north elevation is in the bottom middle. Here are some more photos from the street view. And in the middle image, some of the one piece of the addition that work had already started. And you can see that that's from the north elevation in the rear of the building. Here are some additional photos of that same addition where work had started. On the image to the left is the house as we purchased it. On the right, it kind of segregates a little bit better the additions that we hope to do. In the blue, you can see the additions that already took place, and we will talk about that a little bit later. The ones in the red are proposed and have not taken place yet. Now I'm just going to go through the elevations. We're showing how we had purchased the house and what we're proposing. This is the south elevation. This is the elevation that you would see from the street view. And as you can see, really, there's not too much that we're changing here. The next image is the north elevation. This is in the back. This is where we already made that addition. This is the west elevation. This is what you see from the driveway looking at the house. Again, on the top image is what the house was purchased when it was purchased, and on the bottom is what's proposed. And this is the east elevation. Again, same thing. Here's some cut sheet, some sections of the house. We were asked to include this, and the architect thought this was a good idea to include. So you can kind of see the proposed versus the original. Here, we're going floor by floor to kind of compare the two from a layout perspective. The cellar has no changes. The first floor, we are taking the porch that was existing and enclosing it. And then on the left of the entrance, we're adding an office. And on the second floor, the two setbacks, the one on the right is what's already taken place. The one on the left, which is street, it's on the street side, is not done. And this is what we're proposing, that we enclose that space. And then on the attic, or the storage, we've just there was one dormer that existed that was on the west elevation facing the driveway. We've added the 3 additional dormers for some light, just to make the space a little bit nicer and actually more consistent with the one dormer that was already shown. Here you can see a little bit more clearly in that attic section. This is the roof. We did have the roof when we purchased the house did have some damage and leaking, and so this was a necessary fix regardless. And so we went ahead and did the dormers. This is going into the windows, and later in the presentation we'll show you a couple of comparison of houses that have similar windows in this historic district. We are trying to keep with the area, and this is what we're proposing for our windows.
Before you go from this, just a quick question. Type 2.1, type 1.2. The mullions are not centered on the pane. Is that on purpose? Or is that just the drawing error? See what I mean? Type 2.1, type 1.2. You have the top window, and you see how the bar and the horizontal bar is not like in the middle?
That's probably just maybe the screen is like a little bit.
Screen error.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's not your
Thinking to be
intention.
centered. Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
okay.
No, it's centered.
While you're talking about the windows, can you tell us what the materials in the windows are?
The materials will be. I actually have another slide. I can just go to the next slide. So here you can see that the window materials are going to be wood. It's actually an error on the exterior. It will be interior white as well as exterior white to keep with the area. And these are just the sizes of the windows and the sections of the window jambs, but it will be wood.
This shows metal clad wood. Is that what you wanted to use?
It shows metal clad, but we are planning to do wood, if I'm not mistaken, right, Ara? Yes.
There you go. Thank you.
Here are 2 houses that we researched, and although they were designated landmark after their alterations and additions, these were clearly landmarked, and they kind of represent a similar look to what we plan to do. Especially if you look at the top left image, the top right image, which is that's 21 Beverly Road. The address on there is incorrect. They have the same exact windows that we are proposing. This is the house. Again, don't take this image too seriously. The gray is not going to be the color. That's just what the 3D modeler had done. We are going to stick with the same exact color. It will be like a cream to match what's existing there. And the windows, again, I've confirmed this with the owner, will be white on the exterior and not black. And then here are some images that the two women that we have been working with on this presentation asked us to add, and they show the images of this house from the year 1997. And that's our presentation.
Okay, and just, I'm not sure if you already described the facade materials, but I know we covered the windows. What about the facade cladding?
Yeah, it's gonna be, you're talking about the windows?
No, is it stucco on the facade?
Yeah, it will be.
What is it now, and what will it be?
Right now, it's like a terracotta, not terracotta, it's like a plaster exterior. And we're proposing to do it as an EIFS with the same, nowadays with EIFS, you can kind of get a similar texture. You can get a similar texture as the plaster, and the color would be the same. We would closely match it as possible, as much as possible.
Okay, other questions?
So you already started on some significant additions. Was there a permit issued for those?
No, so I was not involved in the process at that time.
You're the architect, right?
I'm not the architect. I'm an owner's rep who.
Owner's rep.
Yes, I'm an owner's rep. I've developed in the city, and I've done a couple of these meetings. So my friend has asked me to be here, and the addition took place. Aurel, the owner, and the GC. I don't believe they were too familiar with the process with Landmark was. Started doing the work. The DOB came out there, told them this is not the proper procedure, and they immediately stopped the work. So that addition in the back is done, as you can see.
So they did it without a landmarks approval and without a DOB approval?
They had a DOB permit, but I believe that their permit was probably for interior only and not exterior.
There you go.
And
Thanks.
the general contractor there just figured he'd move forward with it. So
Guess he did. Thanks.
Okay, other questions? All right, let's move to public testimony, and we may come back with more questions after that.
sure.
Okay, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance. Simeon Bankoff?
Historic Districts Council. Thank you for the clarity in the presentation that actually answers the first part of my question, my testimony, which was in reviewing the presentation, our committee was uncertain as whether some of this work had already commenced. If it has, and it has, unfortunately, that's most unfortunate, as the proposal is taking this 100-year-old arts and crafts style building in exactly the wrong direction. One of the most defining characteristics of the arts and crafts style is distinct asymmetry. On this building, there was only one dormer, or there was only one dormer, and a side porch for a reason, because it fits with the original design intent and creates a specific and deliberate look. This proposal seeks to bury the body of this house under an enormous amount of padding, obscuring its lines and diluting its profile. Although it is keeping the same basic footprint, the proposal transforms the existing house into an unrecognizable agglomeration of dormers and bump outs. It loses all balance and much of its character. We urge the LPC to deny this proposal and instruct the applicant to return it to a more appropriate fashion.
Thank you. John Graham?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the VSNY. The proposed changes to this building are so severe that we are commenting on this application, even though the building is slightly outside the time period the VSNY usually focuses on. When our Preservation Committee reviewed this proposal last week, we were both distressed and confused. We were distressed because the addition of 3 new dormers and the construction of a 1-story rear-facing addition are well underway, as can be seen on boards 6 and 7. We are also distressed to realize that if all the changes the applicant is requesting are approved, this historic house will virtually disappear. We were confused because the ongoing work isn't mentioned in the notice of public hearing, nor is the fact that LPC certificate of no effect 21-04-971 was issued on December 24th, 2020 for interior alterations only, and that LPC violation 21-00065 was issued on March 11th, 2021 for ongoing alterations to rear facade and roof without permits. This got us interested, so we checked the DOB website. We found that 4 DOB permits had been issued, all for interior alterations. As far as we can tell, no DOB permits have been issued for exterior work or the construction of any additions. Commissioners, as we noted above, the applicants have already made changes at the roof and at the north facade, which faces the rear of the property. Happily, they have not yet reached the building's 2 most prominent elevations, the west, which features the primary entrance, and the south, which faces the street and has an historic 1-story extension. We ask the Commission to stop this expansion right now and leave the historic south and west facades intact. This will preserve the original proportions of the house as seen from the street, important historic detail, and the overall character of this block. Finally, Commissioners, Board 15 shows that the applicant is proposing to demolish all of the interior bearing partitions on the ground floor without the addition of any support columns. We know applicants don't usually submit structural drawings along with their presentation material, but we ask that the Commission reach out to DOB to confirm that the proposal is structurally sound. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Yes, please do.
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. I'm sorry to say that we were unaware, and I think it's not clear in the presentation that there was a serious amount of illegal work here. It's hard for us to understand, and I hope that the legal department will clarify this. Doesn't this affect his ability to come forward for a normal approval when numerous violations have been issued and presumably ought to be reversed? I would like to hear your thinking on the procedure here. Thank you.
On this application, they are seeking to legalize the work that they've begun already without LPC permits. The LPC, as well as DOB, both issued stop work orders and both issued violations. And the applicant is also seeking approval for additional work that have not yet begun.
All right. Would you like to respond to some of the comments? Particularly, I think that the fact that this is coming to us after the work began, and I think it's fairly clear the owner understood the responsibilities of the landmark property because they got the certificate of no effect for interior alterations from us. So I think that one can assume they knew they should have come to us for the exterior. So I think it's very dismaying to hear that this much work has happened without coming to us. We'll evaluate the proposal in its entirety, but do you want to address any final issues related to appropriateness and whether you think these additions change or maintain the style of the building?
Sure. So, we formally apologize for doing these additions. The owner, as I mentioned previously, was not aware of Landmark. I don't think he knew what he was getting into, or he probably wouldn't have purchased the house, to be frank with you, because he's got 3 kids and a wife, and he was anxious to move into a house where he could live and go to the schools. And it's been a really stressful time for him, given the fact that there's this pandemic. He hasn't been able to move into the house. His kids can't go to the schools that they were hoping to. It's been very, very stressful for him. And I know for a fact he wouldn't have purchased this house if he understood the implications of the landmark process. And so he, I don't want to blame it on ignorance, but essentially he didn't understand the process. He came in, hired a general contractor who clearly didn't understand the practices of landmark either. And they just kind of figure it out. We'll move this along, and unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for you as well, we understand that you want to keep the house and and go through the formal process, and I understand where you're coming from 100%, and I understand the woman and the gentleman that spoke on defending, their purposes. But I think a little bit of empathy in this particular situation is just because, he didn't know what he was getting himself into. He stopped as soon as he was notified not to do the work anymore. He's getting violations. He has a stop work order. He has a general contractor that he has to continue paying. And that's where he kind of sits right now. So we do apologize that he went out of order. There's really nothing that can be done at this point. The work was done. Luckily, he didn't start the work on the street or Western, which is really what's viewed by the pedestrians and people in the neighborhood. I think the back is not really viewed by too many people, but this is where we are. So we apologize. We appreciate your review of this, and we hope that he can have this home in a fashion where it's livable in a short time.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, do they have an estimate of the current square footage and the original square footage and the planned square footage? You're talking about something being livable for the family. So what's the difference? You know what?
So the question is, what was the square footage of the house in its original footprint and the proposed square footage altogether with the existing additions and the further proposed additions?
I can definitely give you the proposed.
That's probably more
I
relevant.
just can't zoom in, so.
Sure. So it's, I'm happy to wait for the figure. It doesn't, we can.
Okay, and I think maybe if you go to, you have it's sort of I think an axon or a bird's eye view. Yeah, with the blue and the red dotted lines. If you could just go to that.
Well, I think this actually is going to show you better. You can see, like if I had to guess, it's around this and this, which is dimension to 21 times, it's about 10. This is probably about 400 square feet addition. You have the office over here, which is about a 10 by 12. It's probably another 150 feet. And the porch on the first floor, which is an additional 20 by 10. So we're talking about an additional 700 square feet to this house. Below 600?
Okay, and so,
Around 5, a little bit below 600, I guess, is the accurate number of addition.
so the additions are the second floor on each wing, one of which has already been built. The office addition at the back or the
It's that
side
concrete, yeah, the porch enclosing. Those are the.
and the porch enclosure. Okay,
The
so
porch enclosure, the two terraces, and the office that you see on the bottom, top left of the bottom left.
okay.
And the two dormers.
And
three
the
dormers.
3 dormers, which don't add square footage, but change the roof line.
Correct.
And can you go back to maybe the streetscape photos, just to see this in the street?
I'm having trouble with mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, was that it? That's it, right?
Yes, I mean, this is, you can see kind of the west and the south elevation of the top left.
So the photo on the left is, shows the dormers have already been done. The second floor on the back wing has been done, but the porch and the office have not been done.
That's correct.
So they would be at the front,
They would get the things.
surrounding that front portico.
What, yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Just to clarify, I think conditions prior to this latest round of work, the wing on the back of the house, which I think is the north side, was not enclosed at the time. So that was taken off, and then the two-story addition essentially built in its place. And there was that sort of wrapped around into the front towards the portico entrance. So that has also since been removed, although the proposal is to put that back and enclose it fully as it wraps toward the front.
that was an open.
It was an open
porch.
porch, yes.
From the left, from the top left image, you can see that porch was turned into this addition.
So the only enclosed sort of wing was the one that you see on the south side of the house, which has been there since the tax photo in that condition enclosed, although the report says that it believes it was open originally. But that was the only sort of enclosed wing. And I think there may also be a one-story bump out on the east side. That was an existing one-story addition, but I can't see it in these photos.
Okay. All right, any final questions? Any? All right, let's move to close the hearing. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Just a motion to close the hearing.
I so motion.
And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we're going to begin our discussion now. And so while some of this work has already occurred, we of course will look at each component in terms of their appropriateness, regardless of whether they're built or not. And so we will look at it as if it weren't built and make a determination from there. So Commissioner Goldblum, will you take us on?
Sure.
On this?
Thank you. Okay. Well, this is a sad state of affairs. And much as I think the appropriate thing to do is to disregard the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to note, it's not really a resolution, but Committee Board 11 didn't vote on this matter because of scheduling conflicts and complying with permissible meeting locations because of COVID. But they did write to us to express concerns about the work, the violations, and the accuracy of the documents. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. So let me begin by just kind of getting it out of the way. The notion that the applicant didn't know, was ignorant, is clearly belied by the fact that he got an interior certificate of no effect, and he got four interior building permits. So his lack of knowledge and ignorance is quite conveniently selective. But that shouldn't necessarily affect our judgment, though of course it certainly does leave a bad taste in the mouth. The house itself was a simple, not particularly charismatic, but attractive arts and crafts style house. And as the applicant knows, because he's been here before, there are certain standards that this commission takes to keep neighborhoods like Douglaston having the value and attractiveness that the owner sought when he purchased the house here in the first place. And by doing this kind of work, he was, as the applicant I'm sure knows, he's going against that and devaluing both his own house and the district as a whole, in my view. And the sad thing is that most of the things that he was seeking to do could have been done, can be done, in a way that would meet with this commission's standards. all the time. We review additions and modifications to historic houses that significantly change their volume to a degree considerably higher than is being applied for here, but doing it in a way that is sensitive to the existing house, the style of that house, the volume, the reading of that house from the street. Really, the things about the addition that are, or the addition proposed and built that are offensive have to do less with the volumes per se than with how they are articulated. The goal in doing a landmark addition is to allow for the viewer to understand and see and experience the historic house and the addition, as two separate things. And that can be done in a number of ways. But the additions must be consistent with and deferent to the main house. By putting a new two-story structure that blends the lower structure with it and erases the distinction between the first floor enclosed porch and the second floor volume, and by putting a gable on that end on a house that has, that had no gables, and introducing a new style and having that gable to be at an angle that is completely different from the house itself, which is characterized by a very simple 4-square roof with a hip dormer and a hipped entry that recalls that dormer, you're basically throwing the house out and sticking your own house on the front and the back of it. And that's just not going to be acceptable. So it's my recommendation personally, and wherever the commission comes to, I would suggest that the applicant be directed to remove all of the additions, restore the house, and sell it as was expressed in a restored fashion per the commission, or to come back to the commission with something that is appropriate and sensitive to the house. And he can have exactly, precisely the house he wants, but it'll be better because it'll enhance the district instead of dragging it into the toilet.
Okay, and can I push you a little further to just give some guidance on?
Sure. So the two porches on either side should be rendered as enclosed additions. If you go around the district, and let me just take a look here if I can see it on your examples. Hold on a second. Yeah, if you look at, well, it's not exactly a great example, but it's not bad. If you take a look at your page 20 of 22, it's perfect actually. There you go. Top right picture. Notice how the second floor addition is expressed. It is a fully glazed, a kind of hipped roof addition, hipped roof following the same angles as the rest of the house, same style as the rest of the house. You can still read the volume of the 1-story extension that may have had a rooftop addition on it. Something like that is the logical way to do it, right? Notice how the additions generally mimic the qualities of the house itself. I mean, I think the idea of doing, the windows as he has them, they have to be drawn correctly. The drawing has to show what you're going to build. The fact that this set has, we've only seen it for 10 minutes and we found at least 5 or 6 errors. You got to get the errors out, because if you don't do that, your builder's going to build it that way. And, the drawings have to be correct. So, take the time and effort to correct the drawings and get it right. But I think that the windows per se are fine, certainly in wood.
The porch.
The porch enclosure is the same idea. This guy enclosed his porch. It used to be an open porch, but you can still read it as a porch.
Right. But this house actually doesn't currently have a porch. I think the whole porch is.
I mean, the top one, which was probably the same.
Yeah.
You could extend your porch in some manner that would be similar to how other houses in the neighborhood have done it. And I would suggest that you do it not to the right of the front door, but to leave the front door in its current condition exposed, so that the impression from the street is more of continuity, and then you do your addition off to the left. I mean, frankly, the rooms that are created by these additions are incredibly poor quality rooms to begin with. So the notion of doing it, you're not really losing much on your house. If that's the difference between living in the house and not living with the house, you should have bought a different house. It's a pretty,
Okay.
they're not much value-added rooms.
And I think just to cover all aspects of this, I think the applicant mentioned EFS as some materials.
Right. Yeah, that's a non-starter. In a historic district, you use historic materials for a house. You don't build it out of plastic. You build it out of cement stucco in a way that matches the existing house in its construction, not only in its appearance.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Well, unfortunately, I have to generally agree with my colleague. Obviously, we never like to see a situation where someone has proceeded without permits or proceeded. We often have people who exceeded a permit, but usually they've at least got a permit. And I'm a little confused as to why they have to pay a general contractor if he didn't have a permit from buildings, because I would be suing that contractor myself. But anyway, that's a different issue. So in general, I agree with many of Michael's remarks, so I'm not going to repeat them. In general, there's a problem with the subordination of the addition to the main house, the original house. What we look for, we allow additions and very substantial additions many times, particularly in this district, which has fairly large houses. But we always want the expression of the design to give prominence to the main original building and also to the shape of that building, so you can see what was there originally. And one of the things that was first done, obviously, that is one of the large problems with that, is adding 3 additional dormers, which is uncharacteristic of this kind of house, and ended up, totally obliterating what the original roof line and shape was. So that's problem number 1. And many of the additional pieces just don't step back far enough or aren't low enough to have the sense, or aren't positioned in a way that makes you, helps you to remain aware of what the original volume and shape of the house was. And it's possible to do that. We see that done all the time. So I'm particularly concerned about the front view, and to me, some of the symmetry of the house is being disrupted and destroyed also by the way the additions are proposed to be done. So that's the basic problems I have, and
All right, thank you.
the overall, and I can't approve this as presented.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Walford Smith?
I agree with my fellow colleagues. If this had come to us before us to get an LPC permit, we would not have allowed it because it does not meet the criteria of an addition to an historic building. So I think Michael laid out a lot of good ideas, that the additions should be subservient to the house, that as Diana said, the reading of the original volume needs to be maintained, and there are ways to do it. I'm not going to go into any other, further. I think we said enough, but yeah, as it is, it's not acceptable.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Situations like this, it's our obligation to try to review the application as if it was de novo, which is to say, the standard we use is no higher than it would have been if we had seen this in the first instance prior to any work being done. But it's also that the standard is no lower than it would have been if it had come to us in the first instance. And so I do agree with my fellow commissioners and their comments. I would just, I guess in some sense, disagree with Commissioner Goldblum in this area, which is that I think he implied that there are ways to get all of this accomplished. I can't imagine 4 dormers being on this house under any circumstances, no matter how they're designed. I don't think they would complement the design of the original house. As for extensions, I'm sure there are ways to get to the various other extensions. But this is not it. This takes away, if you had to list the top 5 characteristics of an arts and crafts house, this particular approach obliterates those. If it had come to us in the first instance, that's what the applicant would have heard, that's what the contractor and the architect would have heard, and they would not be in this situation. So I guess I agree with Diana. You need to sue somebody because this should not have happened.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I don't have much to add. I think everything has been said.
Okay. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, it's has all been said. I mean, it's a sad day. There's an expression in construction, you know, you measure twice before you cut once. In this case, you cut twice before you measure. So it is a very tragic day for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think, this is very problematic for us because of the loss of fabric that has already happened on this site. So when work happens without a permit, it's especially when we know that the owner had already been in touch with this agency and understood the obligations. It's especially distressing and upsetting because there is loss of fabric, and we do approve additions, and we could have worked together towards something that might have been approved today, but at this point, you are not going to get an approval today, and this process will continue to be longer than if you had come in the first place. So I think what we're going to do today is we don't have any support for the changes as presented. We will deny the application today. And as was stated, the owner can either remove everything and restore it or submit a new application to redesign based on some of the guidance that we've given today on how additions, the materiality, the design, the expression, the form of them can relate to, be subordinate to, and deferential to the main building, and allow the main building to still have a sense of legibility. So we'll make a motion to deny. Commissioner Goldblum, I think, can you also add the APHIS in there as well? Because I think it's not in there. We did not know about that.
Very good. Regarding 237 Beverly Road in the Douglaston Historic District, the application is to enclose a porch, replace windows, and construct dormers and additions. I note that the building's scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Douglaston Historic District. I further note that the proposed work has already commenced without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. I recommend denial, finding that the cumulative effect of the large and prominently placed additions, particularly where facing Beverly Road, will detract from the primacy of the original house and will obscure and overwhelm the historic size and form of the building. That the proposed interconnected dormers will create a prominent and atypical assemblage at the roof, which will draw undue attention to itself. That the proposed modifications to window openings and introduction of multi-light windows at visible facades will not match the historic 1/1 windows in terms of proportions and configuration, and will further alter the historic design and appearance of the house. That the proposed change to the profile of the dormer eaves from hipped to gabled, and the use of gabled ends at the proposed side additions will not be in keeping with the style of the house or with the profile of the historic eaves, and will detract from the unity of the roof design. That the choice of a synthetic stucco siding system is antithetical to the historic materials often found in the district and to the cement stucco found on the house itself. That the work will detract from the special architectural and historic character of the house and Douglaston Historic District.
Okay, and Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, John, sorry.
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson. Aye. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
All right, so that's denied. You can continue to work with the staff to figure out your next steps.
I just want to clarify that I do have experience with LPC. I'm not the owner. He is the owner. He has no experience with LPC. He just asked me to come here because I do have some experience working with you guys, and that's why I showed.
Okay, Commissioners, we're going to move to the Preservation Department's public meeting agenda now. The first item is item number 1, LPC 21-10467, an application for an amendment in Borough of Brooklyn, Block 189, Lot 46, 185 Dean Street in the Boerum Hill Historic District. This is a late Italian-style row house built in 1868 to 69. The application is to amend the proposal approved at the public hearing on May 11th, 2021 for a rear yard addition. And before turning the slides over to the architect, I'm going to spend a few minutes explaining the circumstances behind the request by the applicant that is before you today. The applicant seeks clarification of the stipulation to reduce the size of a rear yard addition approved by the commission, again at the public hearing of May 11th, 2021. And I'll be using the slide on the screen, LPC 108, to illustrate a couple of key points. I hope you can make out the building street address numbers. During the commissioners.
Sorry, go ahead.
During the commissioners' discussions, it was thought that the second level of the adjacent rear addition, right here.
Sorry, Corey, I just want to interrupt. I think commissioners, this is here. It's an unusual reason. It's here for a clarification on our decision the last time. So Corey's not just reading the description into the record. He's actually giving you the history to set that up, just so you understand why we're here today.
Correct. Okay, so back to this point area, there's 187. During the discussion, it was thought that the second level of that rear yard addition adjacent to the subject property projected 14 feet into the yard. At that time, only dimension of the first level of the rear yard addition, again seen here, which has a tiered massing instead of being in plane, was indicated as 16 feet on the drawings. The second level dimension, which is in the darker blue, was not indicated at that time. And further, the nearby rear yard additions at 177 and 175 were indicated as 14 feet in the drawings at that time. So during the discussion, some commissioners' comments used this 14-foot measurement as a standard. A number of commissioners asked that the addition align with the adjacent neighbor at 187 Dean Street, sometimes referencing 14 feet, sometimes not. Still others wanted to see it smaller, but didn't reference alignment or the 14-foot standard. So the chair read the commissioner's findings of approval with the stipulation that the addition be set back to 14 feet to align with the neighbor or less. It was later determined that the adjacent addition at 187 Dean actually projected 11 feet at the second level, not 14 feet. It was further determined that the additions at 177 and 175 Dean also project 11 feet, although 177 includes a bay window that projects further for a total depth of 12.9, and that addition was approved by the commission. So one more thing just to wrap up. The staff determined that the intent of most commissioners was to align with the adjacent neighbor at 187 Dean Street at the second level, even if that addition is shorter than what was believed at the hearing. However, because there are discrepancies with dimensions, as I indicated and was discussed, the applicant's here to seek this clarification on the intent of the original approval and to use the 14-foot dimension for the new addition. So with that, the architect Brendan Coburn is here to discuss this in further detail after we open the proceedings.
Okay. All right. And Commissioner Hopefully Smith, would you make a motion to open the proceedings? So moved. Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. So Brendan, you may speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you might want to really hold it in front of you.
Okay.
We're finding it so difficult with masks and the air conditioning.
All right. Hi, I'm Brendan Coburn. I'm here to seek this clarification on the dimension. I'm just going to skip ahead to the crux of it. Actually, I will. Okay. This, I think, slide explains things well. So what we're here, what we are requesting is approval of this scheme at a depth of 14 feet. There was confusion about in the finding on what the depth was based on the labeling of the drawings. And I think what we've done here is we've clarified all the dimensions of the adjacent structures. And so you can see that our project, which is 185, is in the gray mass, and it's showing that 14-foot dimension. The previously approved scheme at 187, which is the two-tiered scheme, is 16 feet at the garden floor and 11 feet at the parlor floor. Other additions on the block are 10, and the sort of mass of the addition is at 10 and 10 feet generally. 177 and 175 are at a combination of strange dimensions. 11 feet sort of is, again, the general mass of the two-story piece. 177 has a projecting bay on it, and then it also has a one-story addition at the garden level, which sticks out another 10 or so feet. So we want, our understanding from the hearing was that 14 feet, our original scheme was at 16 feet. We were asked if we could pull it back. The number we heard was -2 or 14 feet and alignment. Those were the three things that got tossed around. 14 feet is our strong preference because it works for the client's program. The client is a young, sort of modern family in a row house neighborhood where the parlor floor contains the kitchen, dining room, and living room. And in order to have those functions work well within the floor plate, that really sort of pushes us out to that 14-foot number. That's what works really, really well. We have, the bulk equivalent between us and the previously approved house is very similar when you take the sort of combined setback. And we think we think that the donut, without question, can handle, this is going back and looking at the overall donut, which I would, also remark has been annihilated by the nursing home at the corner of Hoyt Street. But that aside, houses on the opposite side of the donut are all over the place in terms of depth, some as much as 18 feet, some as little as 12 feet or 10 feet. So we think that this donut is capable of handling this little two-story extension. And we think that the architecture, more importantly, of our extension was more in keeping with the scale of the back of the house. So, I added this this little axionometric rotated 90 degrees to point out that the one element of visibility from Bond Street is this 3-foot projection, which would be there at it would be visible from Bond Street. And I have a little. There you can see on the right is the photograph from Bond, and then on the upper left is the blow up. And we are, so 3 feet of wall will be visible. We would propose to build that wall in brick so that it sort of faded into the background of the nursing home that's there at the end of the block, and also would be a material that was more in keeping with the neighborhood as opposed to a stucco. I think that.
Okay,
that
are there
cover?
any questions?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand it, and I apologize for being dense about this, but let me see if I got this. The house next door is 16 and then 11 at the parlor floor, right? 16 and 11. You want to go 14 and 14, right? And the interpretation of what we did the first time was?
Okay, so the first time, the second floor of the adjacent addition at 187 Dean was not dimensioned. And at 177 and 175 were dimensioned, but as 14 feet. So in the discussion, many commissioners asked that many commissioners liked the fact that it was a straight addition, not a stepped addition. But they asked that the addition be set back to align with the second floor of 187. Others said 14 feet to align with 187 because no one was sure what that dimension was and thought it was 14 feet. And then other commissioners said the addition should be set back to match other additions, particularly 175 or 177.
Okay.
So now, as it turns out, the architect has more carefully dimensioned everything, and those additions are 11 feet with some projections that push them out to maybe 13 at 177.
Okay, so would it offend you, Chair, if we, when we get to discussion, we go around and say what we meant?
Yes.
That wouldn't offend you?
That would not. No. That's why we're here today,
Just wanted
because I
to get
think the way that we read the motion was that it should align with the second floor of 187. And that's what the staff interpreted it to mean. The applicant did hear this 14 feet, and that's why they're here for the clarification. And so that's what this is about today. But they did also today just show the other side of the block that shows deeper additions, although those were not the focus of our discussion as much at the time. Okay. All right, any other questions? No, okay, all right, so why don't we begin our discussion on this one? Do you want to go ahead, John?
I am 100% certain that I did not have a number in mind first time around. And I am also 100% certain I am fine with the 14 and 14, especially in light of the character of the rest of the donut. I no idea whether I speak for anyone other than myself.
That's great, thank you. Commissioner Hopwood Smith.
I don't recall exactly what I said. I think I probably said it should align with the building next door. But I think that the 14 feet is actually okay.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, going back to what John often says about looking at things, as if they could, can they be appropriate? I think this is slightly bigger, but in the context of the entire donut, I think it looks appropriate, looks reasonable, so I could prove it as now presented.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree, it's appropriate as is.
Commissioner Chen.
Well, not to disagree.
And Commissioner Jefferson?
It is.
Okay, all right, so there we have it. The solution, the resolution is that a two-story, 14-foot deep addition is appropriate within this context. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion?
I will try. In the matter of LPC 21-10467-185 Dean Street in the Boerum Hill Historic District, the application is to amend a proposal approved at the public hearing of May 11, 2021 for a rear yard addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Boerum Hill Historic District. Good question. Okay. I recommend approval with, I guess, a modification from the first ruling, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the height of the proposed two-story rear addition will not overwhelm the building and will match the predominant height of existing rear yard extensions within the block, that the upper floors of the visible rear facade will remain intact, thereby preserving the relationship between this and other buildings in the row, that the north side of the central green space across from the subject property contains a number of deeper rear yard additions, therefore a minimally visible addition that is modestly deeper than the predominant depth on the south side of the block will be in keeping with the variety of additions that exist overall, that the composition and materiality of the rear addition featuring painted wood and glass window assemblies, brick-clad masonry at the side facades, and a steel deck and stair will maintain the building's residential character and is in keeping with the character of other rear facades and additions on the block, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Boerum Hill Historic District.
Commissioner Hopwood Smith, would you second the motion?
I second it.
Thank you. John?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to public meeting item number 2, LPC 21-05419, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the borough of Manhattan, block 73, lot 11, 95 Marginal Street in the South Street Seaport Historic District, also known as the Tin Building. This is a neoclassical style market building constructed in 1907 and currently under reconstruction. The application is to install signage. This was last presented at the public hearing of February 9th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. And Deputy Director Edith Bellinghausen will be running through the slides today to show the presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Edith Bellinghausen, Preservation Staff. As Corey mentioned, this is the Tin Building in the South Street Seaport Historic District, which is currently under reconstruction, seen in these slides. Okay, so at the public hearing of February 9, 2011, the Commissioners reviewed a proposal for building signage. Overall, the Commissioners supported the presence and variety of signage at this market building, but most Commissioners agreed that the overall quantity of signage should be reduced. Additionally, some Commissioners expressed concerns about specific types and locations of signage, which is outlined here, but in summary, these include canopy-mounted extruded metal signage that the Commissioners felt was atypical and did not recall the historic signage as found on the canopies. The blade signs below the canopies, the comment to that was that they seemed homogeneous and not in keeping with historic signage that expressed the variety of the fish market vendors. And finally, building identification signage located at the upper floors of the east and west facades, that there were too many of those. Some Commissioners felt that the halo lit was atypical, but most agreed that that typology was appropriate at this location, specifically for wayfinding. So that comment was mostly about the quantity. Also note that there were no concerns expressed with the remaining exterior signage, which you'll see in the slides, including painted letters and logos and corner bracket signs. So in response to these comments, the applicants have returned with a revised proposal, and I will now walk you through those changes. So starting at the west and north facades, shown here on the left is the previous proposal, and on the right is the current proposal. So starting with the canopy mounted signs previously, as you see here, there were extruded metal signs that were proposed above the canopy. Those have now been eliminated and replaced with a more traditional painted signage at the fascia of the canopy. They've also reduced the size of the letters from 16 inches previously proposed to 12 inches. Next was the blade signs beneath the canopy. The designs of those, as seen here, have been updated to express more variety and reflect a diverse mix of offerings at this market building, which is in lieu of the single placeholder designs previously proposed. And then last, with the building identification signage at the upper floors, these have been reduced in quantity from the 3 signs you see here to the 2 building identification signs you see here, in addition to relocating the shield feature that was previously on the canopy, then to the building facade. Moving just to the east and south facades, similar revisions. Again, the canopy mounted extruded metal signage has been eliminated, replaced with the painted signage at the canopies shown here, reducing the height of the letters. And then again, the building identification signage at the upper floors has been reduced from these 5 signs to the 3 signs shown here. These are just renderings of the revisions in a larger scale for clarity, both here at the west facade and at the east. And then here is a rendered view of all the locations of the building of the proposed signage. That concludes the changes.
All right, thank you, Edith. Any questions for Edith or the applicant? No, okay. And we did not receive any additional written comments on the revised proposal, so I think we can just begin our discussion then. So this is, they've reduced the amount of signage and the size of signage, and in some cases changed the type in response to our comments. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that they've addressed the comments that we made at the last hearing. I think moving the signage from the top of the canopy to the fascia is appropriate as a painted sign. It's very typical of the original Seaport Mercantile building that was here originally. I think the reduction in the number of signs on the building, the illuminated signs, is an improvement. And I think I don't know if we talked, the blade signs part of this, we didn't really talk about that, but the blade signs.
Yes, so we had asked, we thought they were too homogeneous and too generic, and so now they are, there's a little more variety in them, and so their sizes vary as well as their shape.
Yeah, I think that is appropriate. And I don't know if they reflect actual stores, that they may change, but I think the different types of blade signs and the different figural designs they use are appropriate. So I find this change to be appropriate.
All right, great, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I agree that generally they have responded to the comments that we had about removing the signage from the top of the canopy and the placement and the some reduction of signage, and also creating some individuality with regard to the signage for the individual retail establishment. So I can support it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I think that the painted signage on plaques on the marquee are appropriate. I think the blade signs or pendant signs, whatever we call them, underneath the canopy are appropriate. The painted signs on the sides of the building are appropriate. I still think there's too much signage on the fronts and backs, and I think that pin letters, that's what they are inappropriate. It looks like that's what they were from the rendering anyway. I just think that for a building that never had that kind of branding on it, to the symmetry and repetition of the branding of the building per se, to me, seems inappropriate. I can live with the ones on the side because they have a kind of industrial application and remind me of other kinds of signage that I've seen in the Seaport district generally. But the idea of the branding still, it's better to have fewer than more, but I'm still opposed to the 3 on the front and 3 on the back. I could maybe live with 1 on each side, either a shield or the text, but I think that the repetition and I also would suggest they consider doing it as a painted on the building instead of a pin mounted.
Okay, all right, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I was just walking through this district yesterday afternoon. And I think this application now is, and compared to the prior one, is an improvement over the previous one. The reason I mentioned I was walking through the district was looking at the bound printing house and everything. And I think the painted logos and the painted signs are very, very similar to what is there currently at the historic building. So I have less of a problem with the branding of the logo on the building, on the side of the building.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I think the reduction of signs have improved the building. The signage of the canopy works very well with the canopy. Halo signs, reducing number is wonderful. But I think the blade sign in particular is good because it's ever changing. Would make this thing a continuously changing signage is what I like best about this.
Right, as tenants change, the sign hanging from the armature page. Is that a concern?
That's what I'm.
Sorry? Is that a concern or is that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. So you're comfortable with the proposal as is? Commissioner Gustafson?
I think the applicant responded to all of our concerns to my satisfaction. I'm okay with the proposal right now as is. I think it's appropriate. I do want to commend the applicant on their choice of presenter. I think the presenter did an excellent job.
All right. Okay, I think, yes, thank you, Edith. It was very clear and succinct. We hadn't seen it in a while, and you explained it very succinctly and focused us on the components that we needed to evaluate. So I think we have 6 of us to support it as presented. So will you go ahead and make the motion?
In the matter of LPC 21-05-419, 95 Marginal Street in the South Street Seaport Historic District. A neoclassical style market building constructed in 1907 and currently under reconstruction. The application is to install signage. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the South Street Seaport Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the installation of the proposed signage will not damage or obscure significant architectural features. That the proposed signage, consisting of painted panels, letters, and logos, extruded letters, halo lit letters, adhered vinyl lettering and logos, and bracket signs for building and programmatic identification, will be in keeping with the variety of signage traditionally found at utilitarian and commercial buildings and the evolved commercial character of this historic district. The placement of the proposed painted signage at the fascia of the canopy and bracket signs below the canopy is in keeping with the placement of historic signage sometimes found at market buildings and will clearly identify the ground floor spaces and program. That the painted graphics on the metal facades reinforces the utilitarian character of the corrugated metal. That the proposed installation of one bracket sign or clock at each corner of the building will not overwhelm the building. That the proposed neon signage will be installed a minimum of 6 inches behind the glass and will not reduce the transparency of the display windows. That given the large scale of the building and the location of the elevated FDR drive in close proximity to the front facade of the tin building, the proposed signage will be visible from only limited vantage points, and the cumulative amount of signage will not overwhelm the building. And that the work will support the reactivation of the building and reinforce the special and architectural character of the building as a market structure, and will not detract from the special architectural and historic South Street Seaport Historic District.
All right, Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 6 in favor, 1 opposed, the motion carries.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public meeting item number 3, LPC 20-04558. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, number of Manhattan, block 1184, lot 77, 305 West End Avenue in the West End Collegiate Historic District Extension. It's a colonial revival style apartment building designed by Schwartz and Gross and built in 1919 to 1920. The application is to alter a sidewalk marquee. This was last presented at the public hearing of October 20th, 2020. No action was taken at that time. While some commissioners felt the design was satisfactory, most commissioners agreed that the proposed design was a missed opportunity to enhance this element of the building. These, if you could put it back on slide 20, please. Could you put it back on slide 20? These commissioners suggested that the applicants restudy the design and proportions of the canopy and integrate more profiled articulation at the fascia paneling, as seen on the left. That's what was presented previously. Most commissioners agreed that the skirt should be shortened and set back from the face of the canopy to avoid the appearance of a large, heavy volume at the entry of the building and to better connect with the base of the building along the entry. So the applicant's here to present the revised design and answer any questions after we open the proceedings.
All right, so actually, we'll, Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings so the applicant may speak? Just say, yes, I'll make a motion.
I do.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so the applicant may present now. Just please start by stating your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Sumita Sanyal. I'm here on behalf of Tom McNeil Feld. So as mentioned previously, this was presented back in December. So I'll give you a brief recap. Up here right now, you have the historic photos to give you some context. It's located on 74th and West End Avenue. This is a better image that we were able to obtain, where it actually has a little bit more detail of the canopy that did exist back in the day. So some of the commissioners comes at the time were to draw from this and try to bring in some of these detailed elements into our proposed design. So you can see here that the top is that cornice. And then also below there's a band that you can see that has these squares of glass below. So these are some of the elements and also the proportions of this. In terms of the height of these elements, they are much thinner than what we proposed originally. So as you can see here, the existing canopy as it stands now is quite bulky, I guess. It's got quite a proportion to it. It's got quite a large size on the existing metal fascia and also the fabric panel down below. There were existing fluorescent lights and there's a lot of framing below, but that's not going to come out as part of the proposal. As you can see here, it's showing a little bit again of the existing underside of the canopy. There's existing framing where there used to be just aluminum panels. This is a proposed, but I'm going to do a comparison side by side and we'll come back to this. This is some more context for you of the existing fabric below. And then from above as well. The existing canopy itself, there were coffers that were existing, which you can see on the slide on the left-hand side. So we did want to bring that back as opposed to covering it like it is currently. And again, you see the coffers here in section, a little bit more detailed. There are some details that we want to bring attention to again. As the proposed ceiling plan, again, showing how we're maintaining the coffers that are there and only dropping the aluminum panels just for lighting and recessed heaters above the entrances only in these locations. So you can still see the coffers and we want to bring attention to that. I'm just going to skip ahead to the comparison so you can see. Okay, so here we go. So the left-hand side, again, as I mentioned before, it is quite bulky. The entire assembly was a flat, non-dimensional metal panel. Below there is a very large fabric apron. What we're proposing on the right-hand side is, like I mentioned before, try to bring back some of those elements from the historic canopy with the cornice detailing at the top. Some articulation of jointing, so it's not just a flat metal panel going across. It also, we did manage to make this as tight as possible to maintain what we need to drop lighting and a recessed heater below. And below that is a very narrow, but still kind of emulating the glass panels that were below. It's a fabric panel that could be translucent, so you could still have some opacity. Here's some section comparisons of the two. If you look at the top, you can see how much larger it is again in height. If you look down below, you can see how much thinner it actually becomes in our proposed design. The intent again is to narrow it up to get it closer to the historic. Again, as you can tell here, we tried to narrow it as much as we possibly could to reduce that fascia on the front. And as you can tell here in the section, what's controlling or driving this is the lighting that's going to be installed in an aluminum panel in the center of each of these coffers, as well as the recessed heater. Really, it's the heater, but it's an element that the ownership wants for the tenants that exist in the building. I'm going to go back to the renderings now, a second. So this is a side-by-side of the previously proposed and the new proposed rendering. One of the other comments at the time was also the color, the materiality. We did update that a little bit to make it more modern because that was a comment from last time. We're still drawing attention to the coffers, and as you can see here, by giving it this bronze color, it actually draws nice attention to that detail that does exist already. These are just some context shots looking from down the block. So here you can see from various angles what it would look like. A slimmer profile, more articulation on the detail of the cornice at the top, drawn from the existing, from the historic canopy that used to be there. And then also with the fabric awning, by tightening that up quite a bit, it also kind of hard, and it also set it back from the edge, which is very similar to what was on the historic detail as well. These are just some enlarged details. Just showing the cornice detail at the top, the little ins and outs. Again, showing that it's not a flat fascia. This is a transverse section again, showing how we tightened it up as much as we could. And a longitudinal section that also shows again the thinness of it. This is just showing a large detail here of just a little section of it, so you can see the seams that we've allocated onto the fascia itself to break it up, because it is such a long, wide canopy. And also showing the relationship of that to the fabric panel down below. And here we're going to talk a little bit of materiality. Again, we did go back and look at this again and change the materials. So as opposed to before, I think it was like more of an anodized dark bronze. We went with a more modern update. So it's more of a highly contrast. So you can bring more attention to the details that are there. So this is more of a black and white and bronze. That's actually much.
Okay, all right. Any questions, commissioners? Yes.
Correct. At the top, you mean at the cornice, correct? Yes. I mean, that is something we could easily change the profile if we were looking more at softening it up as opposed to having the hard edges.
Yes.
That's something we could definitely look into. I don't see that
Just
as an issue.
because I thought that you had some idea about if
So
this
we
is
were trying
the
to find something that was like
example
kind
you're
of
using.
stepping down in the same proportion where it's larger at the top and then it has two smaller steps inside of it. But I don't see an issue with trying to soften it up and doing rounded edges.
And then I had another question.
But
What is the
actually-
apron?
I'm sorry, actually, let me go back for a second. I just remembered something, I'm sorry. We actually did show that originally to ownership, but they were concerned about the corners and how they come together when you have rounded edges. It's a little harder to miter and bring them together, which is why they opted for the squared, because we actually did, this is what we actually did have originally. But it's gonna be hard to fabricate that and have a nice seam and when those things come together and have tight, watertight.
So the other question is, what is the apron? I kept on trying to understand the fabric apron. Where is it?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
The glass apron. Where's the glass apron?
Oh, it's right below. You see these?
Proposed reference.
Oh. It's actually in the fabric panel below. So what we did is we used the fabric panel. Yeah, right there with the small boxes with the chamfered edges. We basically use the same visual aesthetic and put that on the fabric itself.
Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, excuse me. I wanted to ask a question about the color of the canopy. Historically, I don't think it would have been black necessarily. It probably was a. Did you consider other possibilities, a little bit lighter color that might better,
It's hard because this dark photos we have obviously are black and white. So it's a little, all we have is like a shade indication of what's darker and lighter as our reference. But we would be open to other color variations that, I don't know how we get to a color that's historically accurate. I guess that's the question.
Right,
Because
because
we
they
don't have
don't,
a color photo of the time, which is understandable, of course, but
they don't know what the original finish was.
I'm just looking at the picture and it seems to be of a lighter. Which might, the question is, and forgetting what it was exactly, because we don't know, with something a little softer, perhaps go better with the building. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. All right, other questions? Okay, why don't we begin our discussion? And so this, maybe if you can just take us to a photo.
You want the side by side of the two?
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so this proposal last came to us for a marquee that was quite bulky in comparison, and we asked them to revise the design to make it more streamlined, thinner, and have more articulation and detail, pulling on the historic photographs of the historic canopy that is no longer present. And so they proposed this revised design today. And I think, we don't have approved canopies on large apartment buildings in lots of cases where we have not required a replication of a missing historic canopy, but have looked to sort of those characteristics to inform the design. So I think we should have that in mind as we discuss this. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start?
Sure. It's much improved from the last time. And I think the proportion is much better. But the issue for me still is the details. I mean, it's quite elegant what you've done, but you didn't go far enough because you're giving the example of the historic image. And in that image, there was a softness to it that this hardness doesn't have. So it looks very modern, very hard. And I agree that the color could be softer too. But it's much more improved. And I don't know, I come down and I'm not sure if, I think it can be improved.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's.
All right, so the details and color could still be refined to make it a little softer. Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Jefferson. It is vastly improved and it's 99% of the way there. I think there's a little bit of tweaking that's left, but they can work with the staff on that.
Okay. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. It's a great improvement. And I think working with staff, they can work on the profile of the cornice, and maybe a bronze color would be more appropriate than the black.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree. This is much improved from the previous proposal, and I think it could be, a little more softer, a little more appropriate, working with the staff on the details and the color, but I think can improve it with that proposal.
Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. It's night and day, much better. I personally am not a big fan of that little fabric tassel around the bottom. I took me a while to figure it out, but if it were glass and metal, then I would say that it was a good detail and it should be pushed closer to the front and made a little deeper, maybe 12 inches. If they wanted to do that, I think that'd be something they could do with staff. But as a little fabric fringe, I think it's insubstantial and should be eliminated. I agree 100% with Everardo's comment about the stepped profile at the top. Tell your clients about a miter. Miters work really great on moldings. They have for the last several thousand years. So I think that they'll get a nice tight seal. They shouldn't worry about it. That said, though, I think they could also go with a more modern approach. It doesn't have to be an OG molding, but I think that the proportions of this particular stepped arrangement just kind of highlights the absence of detail in a way that a Mesian profile wouldn't. So I just think that they should look at it with the staff and try to work out something that's just better. I don't know about more or less traditional.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Good observation from Commissioner Goldblum and the rest of the commissioners.
Okay. All right, so I think we can make a motion to approve it with modifications that you continue to work with the staff to refine the profiles and the finish to be to provide a little more articulation and harmony with the building. So Commissioner Jefferson, will you go ahead and make the motion?
In the matter of LPC-20-04558, 305 West End Avenue, West End Collegiate Historic District Extension. Applications to alter a sidewalk marquee. I know that The building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historical character of the West End Collegiate Historic District Extension. I recommend approval with modification finding that the proposed modification to this altered historic marquee will not eliminate any significant architectural features and will reveal remaining portion of the historic underside of the marquee, including the profiles of the coffers. That the proposed profile panels at the sides and perimeter framing of the soffit of the marquee will not conceal any known extant historic decoration elements, that the combination of the simply designed black painted profile metal cladding and a contrasting antique brass tone accent detailing will be compatible with the style of the building and return unity to the marquee design and improve its scale and proportions relative to the building facade. That the proposed enclosure for the heat lamps and light fixture will be simply designed, installed in alignment with the historic framing elements, and largely concealed from view, except directly beneath the marquee. And that the proposed work will not preclude future restoration work or detract from the special architectural or historical character of the building of the historic district. Therefore, I recommend we work with staff to refine proportions, profiles, and finish.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oh, sorry, we have to call the vote. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 7 in favor, none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the next and last item of the day, public meeting item number 4, LPC 21-05356, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1387, lot 56, 900 to 910 Madison Avenue, aka 28 to 32 East 73rd Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an apartment building with classical details designed by Sylvan Bean and built in 1939. And the application is to modify the base of the building and install signage. This was last presented at the public hearing of March 9th, 2021. No action was taken at that time. And as presented at that public hearing, the proposal included installing limestone cladding over the entirety of the existing storefront surround and portions of the metal infill at the multi-bay corner storefront, included illuminated and sized lettering, as well as installing signage in the display windows of the 73rd Street facade. The commissioners expressed an openness to reimagining the treatment at the corner, but had concerns about the historic stone banding above the display windows and the surround, and the amount of historic fabric being clad over, and that the design may not work as well with the historic conditions. So the illumination of the lettering, among other changes, and the applicant's here to run through that for the open proceedings.
Hi, my name is Cynthia A. I'm the architect representing.
Can you motion to open the proceedings?
John, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson, will you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you, John, for catching that.
Hi again, and my name is Cynthia A. I'm the architect representing Frame for this project. Just want to point out, first concern I have, this was my most current proposal that I sent to the Landmarks Commission, so bear with me. I'll try to use what we have here to walk through the changes that we've done. The first meeting held back in, I think it was March or April. The concerns were the concealment of the horizontal banding that wraps the building original to the building. And we responded to that by removing the majority of the limestone at the upper band and only have limestone covering at wrapping the corner. The second major concern brought out from the previous meeting was the bulkiness of the proposed limestone cladding, which was throughout the entire storefront originally from Madison side all the way down towards the lease line on 73rd. And our response to that was removing the majority of the limestone, except at the pilasters flanking the entry doors on Madison Avenue and at the corner wrapping below the upper signage. So that corner goes from the top to the bottom at the corner, wrapping to the first window. So that is the extent of the lower limestone. I'm gonna advance this page. Just the map. Location. I'm just gonna go through this fairly quickly. Find the image that would, so this image shows you the existing storefront and material at the facade at the lower level. The proposal is to restore the existing material and also to restore the existing window frames by cleaning and polishing. And we're going to work with staff level to define what that is. This is the historic tax photos. These are existing storefront images showing you the horizontal banding and the existing images on 73rd Street. Those windows, as a reminder, were not original to the building per our last meeting. It was added on in the subsequent filing on 73rd Street. So this is the proposed exterior work with notes, defining the corner limestone. The upper limestone is hammered finish, and the limestone flanking the entry on Madison Avenue is also a hammered finish to kind of match the exact existing stucco-like finish that's existing right now on the bottom of the building. But the limestone at the corner that's below the sign is a honed and smooth limestone. This is outlining the different stone. The pink is the hammered finish stone, and the blue is the honed finish. It's just a rendered view now of the decreased amount of limestone on 73rd Street, which is just ending over the first window and exposing the decorative banding. And this is the view on Madison Avenue, where we also exposed all the horizontal banding that was covered originally. And you'll see in this image the entry pilasters at the storefront doors. You'll see that we stopped the pilasters at the underside of the horizontal banding. We're going to try to make it flush so that it doesn't protrude. You'll see in the detail later. This is the proposed floor plan. Doesn't have my highlights that I've given, but anyways, it's the same. I'm just walking through the added material only at the entry and at the corner. You see it's shaded gray and hatched in those areas. Here's the highlight elevation showing the extent of the limestone. The gray just represents a different finish. These are just some additional notes. So the proposed signage at the entry is still there with the polished stainless steel plaques. And you'll see in this image better the proposed limestone pilasters added at the right and left of the entry, ending at the underside of the decorative molding. You'll see it's proposed to be flush and not protrude in front as per the previous proposal back in March. Just some signage details. And the signage changed from a lit proposal in the original, and it's now only pin mounted metal on the limestone. These are existing storefront sections. These are proposed sections. You'll see the fourth version. You see at the corner here that the limestone goes to the floor. And the section at the entry, you'll see that it stops at the underside of the banding. These are just additional cuts through the upper level sign band and the extent of the limestone. And then cut at below the sign band and the extent of the limestone below the sign band. And this is the plan at the pilaster flanking the storefront entry. We're calling for caulking between the glass and the limestone. And this is just a section at the side corner signage. We're wrapping it, and as you can see, we're going to align it to the existing framework at the storefront. And this is just the materials. Metal is just at the signage plaques and the two different stones. The stone one is only wrapped around the corner, and the stone two is flanking the entry and the signage at the upper level. And these are just detailed photos of the condition of existing material. You see the cracks which we're proposing to restore. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And just one question. Can you tell me how many windows you have and how many of them are proposed to be boxed out from the inside?
I'm sorry.
So how many of the total number of your windows, how many of them will have the boxed out vitrines behind them?
That would only be on the 73rd Street side. And I believe it was for all of them.
Okay.
Here you go. Oh, yes.
Okay. Other questions?
Just one. The molding, the horizontal molding is the horizontal molding. It's an elegant part of that building. It's just lovely. Why cover it up at the corner? What was the idea of covering it up?
Well, we did cover up originally the whole extent of it, but we pulled back. We pulled back the majority of the side banding coverage. So we just want an area so that we can have more of a signage presence at the corner. So in order to do the 3D and to bring it down, we need to cover at least a small portion of that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Other questions? All right, I think we'll then move into our discussion. So thank you for the presentation. All right, and maybe we can go to the rendering. If you could just turn it to the slide with the rendering that shows the corner view. Yeah, okay. All right, so commissioners, when this was initially presented to us, it was proposed to have limestone cladding around all of the storefront windows for this tenant space. And we did notice that the entire base of the building was continuous beyond the tenant space on both streets, and asked them to not cover this, it's actually stucco, and to reveal the banding. And we also asked them to think about reducing the overall, I think, amount of signage. And so the proposal today reduces the cladding to the limited at the corner, and as was presented, still includes some additional signage on the windows and flanking the entrance. They're also proposing limestone cladding on the pilasters at the entries. Commissioner Goldblum, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's much improved. I think it's basically appropriate as presented. The only suggestion I would make is to drop the top of the limestone down to below that horizontal panel. The only difference being that I think it allows the building to read a little bit more continuously, and it kind of subsumes the retail to the retail zone. I kind of read that top band as belonging to the building. So I would just suggest that they drop that down. But otherwise, I think it's appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I think Michael made a good suggestion. This is much improved over last time, and Michael would always have a keen eye.
Commissioner Jefferson?
The original, as I see it, is light and delicate, and those lines running across it, just a delicate composition. And I think the addition of this corner makes it extremely heavy. So, but I'm willing to accept the language change, but I think those delicate lines should somehow, at the top, as you suggested, go across, so the panel should be lower. And at the lower portion, having it terminate like that is just too abrupt for me, And the delicacy of that, the molding coming and stopping at the corner. I mean, there's got to be another way of making that transition, or saying, this is something special. It comes somewhere and it stops. Because I want to accentuate a corner for some reason. The formal quality of that doesn't quite, it's not making the existing better, but it's almost there. And I don't know. Something has to be done.
So do you think if they reduced, not only lowered it underneath the top horizontal band, but also shortened it from the bottom to reveal the decorative banding?
You see the proportion of the top and the bottom are so odd.
Yep. Okay. All right. Commissioner Gustafson.
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's comments.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yeah, I found this a little odd, but I don't think it's really improving anything, but I suppose it's not really permanent either. So I think I can follow Commissioner Goldblum's suggestion.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin.
Because I was having trouble hearing the air conditioning. So Michael's suggestion was
to lower the top of the limestone cladding to below that horizontal band at the top, the top rib of the fascia. And then Commissioner Jefferson had further suggested revealing the decorative banding at the bottom of that.
just to bring it up entirely, yeah.
May I interject?
Nope.
Sorry.
Okay, I guess I can also go along with Michael's, because that seems to be the majority, and I'm, okay with that.
Okay. All right, so I think we have enough votes to go ahead with the modification that you recommended. So do you want to go ahead and make the motion and add that modification in? Okay.
Regarding 900 to 910 Madison Avenue, also known as 28 to 32 East 73rd Street on the Upper East Side Historic District. The application is to modify the base of the building and install signage. I note the building style, scale, materials, and details contribute to the architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval of modifications finding that the presence of a modestly scaled, unique corner sign panel at the base of this large and simply designed building would not have room in the building or storefront. But the proposed materials and finish of the stone sign panel relate well to the materials and finish palette of the building. The presence of the increased signage will be compatible with the variety of signage found along Madison Avenue within the historic district. However, the sign panel will be lowered to so that its highest point aligns with the bottom of the projected sill under the second floor windows.
Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second that.
And John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson. Aye. Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 7 in favor, none opposed, motion carries.
All right, so it's approved with the modifications and the staff will work it through with you on that. All right, and that concludes our day today. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you all for attending today. We will not have our next hearing until September 14th. So enjoy the break and we'll see